You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Rosie, how do you spell the word diarrhea?
D.
Don't actually do it. That's just how I feel about that Maple Leafs performance last night against the Minnesota Wild. Presented by Bet365. It is the Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. How are you?
It is a weird word to spell. A lot of the performances on the last 3 weeks have been diuretic, man. I'm running out of positives and excuses and things to say about this team here as the losses pile up and the embarrassing numbers start to formulate. It's been ugly, man. I didn't think we were going to be here.
Yeah, and there's a lot to dive into on today's podcast, and certainly we'll get to that loss against Minnesota 3-1. I talked about it on yesterday's podcast. No Kirill Kaprizov, no problem. Well, there was a big-time problem, and that's actually showing up for the hockey game. Maybe the Leafs gala on Monday was really, really good, and they were still hungover 2 days later. Maybe that's the excuse we're going to roll with. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, NATION. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and third in the world. I want to start today's podcast on a lighter note, and I think it's very timely with Marc-Andre Fleury rolling through town. His final game in Toronto, barring something crazy where it's Minnesota and Toronto in the Stanley Cup final. But he's playing in Montreal tonight for the final time. And why am I bringing this up? Jay Rosehill scored his first NHL goal on Marc-Andre Fleury. Break it down, bud.
Sneaky. You know, they say good players, they don't go to where the puck is. They go to where the puck's going to be. And I mean, what better way to sum up my entire career? No, that was a whirlwind. That was a whirlwind of a week, man. Like your first NHL game, you make the club, and it was my third game of my career that I managed to score, which you can tell my celebration was a major shock. I couldn't believe. I'm like, I just buried in the show. But a little sneaky got in there, and that was Jammer. Jamal Mayers just kind of snuck one over to me and banged in a greasy one as I kind of only had the ability to do. So yeah, good memories. Thanks for reminding me, buddy.
What all century team would that line configuration be on? Like the 48th or the 49th? You got your boy Ricky Wallin. They want to leave him out there too. He was first in the celebration.
Ricard Walsey out there, and me and Jammer. So my question is, where was Orzy? I don't really understand why we were a line and Orzy wasn't part of it.
I don't know.
Doesn't even make sense. Third line, perhaps. Oh, let's go. No, I don't.
I think it was a line change, probably. Ricard Wallin.
I know, but I played with Ricard quite a bit. Jammer must have been on the top, on the third line, but I don't think anyone's starting conversations about the all-time historic lines of that combination.
No, that was quite the time to be a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, I'll be honest with you. But I was jacked about the Phil Kessel trade. I was jacked that there was some piss and vinegar in that fourth line. You guys bumped around a bit. Call me old school, but I understand what Brian Burke was alluding to. And I just knew every game you were out there, Orzy was out there, even the Fraser McLaren era, like some shit was going to happen where it's like, I watch the bottom six now. There's just not much cooking. There's just no urgency, no fuck you attitude. It's a tough look right now. It is the dog days of the season, but I think it's really cool, honestly. Like, I know we always joke about you scoring 5.5 goals in the show, but to have your first one on a future Hall of Famer, pretty damn amazing.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. My first pro goal was against Andrew Raycroft when I was 20 in the American League, and I thought that was kind of neat because he was a name.
Yeah.
And then to get it against the Flower, my first one in the big league, it was kind of cool. A guy like me doesn't expect to have many accolades or things to be proud of on the offensive side of the puck, but when you chip in like that, it was kind of a cool memory. And my good buddy from town that I grew up with, I've known him since we were in kindergarten. He came in, he was going to school down in the States, and he came up, he was right behind the net for that one, which is kind of cool. And I remember thinking, oh, Beggar saw that one. It was made me chuckle. But yeah, good memories from back in the day. I cannot believe on YouTube when you sent that, it says 15 years ago.
Yeah, I know. It feels like just yesterday. And again, it's just amazing that you've been out of the league for a couple of years and Marc-Andre Fleury is still going. But can you remember the other 4.5 goalies you scored on?
It was Tuukka Rask. It
Okay.
was uh Dylan or Dubnik.
Devin Dubnyk. Yeah.
Yeah, was it Nabokov in on the
San Jose.
Islanders?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Nabokov.
And oh, must have been Reimer when I scored a game winner for Philly. I can't really remember, man. You think you could rattle those off? I'm not sure. All dusters, I'm sure.
Still pretty damn amazing. So congratulations to Jay Rosehill. Congratulations to Marc-Andre Fleury. I mean, just an
Oh,
unbelievable career. And the great thing about him, so well liked, right?
yeah, universally liked.
Yeah.
He's my draft class, that '03 draft class. It was
Wild.
probably the heaviest in the history of the draft. I mean, you look at the first page of the first round and it's just gross how
Littered.
many studs are. If you look at one like, I don't know, take your pick. I don't know what a weak draft was, but it's like, who's that? And like, not many guys turned out. Everybody turned out in that '03 draft class. He steps into the league back then, which, again, when we're talking about 20 years ago, you think it's like 92, and it's just not. And he just stepped into the league way back then, and he just hasn't left. Like, how is your body not giving up? How is your ability? He's just got a unique mind for that goaltender position, and he doesn't seem to want to give it up. And kind of exciting for him coming up here. Is it Saturday, his last game in the Bell Center? Where
Tonight.
he's from, or is it tonight? Sorry.
Yeah.
Good for him. Very cool. Yeah, he's one of the all-time positive guys. Like, have you ever heard anyone say anything bad about
No.
Marc-Andre Fleury? It's just never happened, and that's over the span of 25 years almost.
Always smiling, and the one thing I vowed to do at some point in time, I actually tried to reach out to his agent to get him on maybe our show, but obviously inundated with requests. I think once he retires, I want to get him on. I want to get to the whole bottom of the Chicago thing a couple years ago, where he was almost a Leaf, right? I think that's a story not really told, very often. It's been out there. Matthew Nyes reportedly was in the deal, but it hit a snafu. It didn't happen. But imagine Marc-Andre Fleury playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That'd have been a cool sight.
That would have been wild. I wonder how it would have gone down. I think just you could probably chalk it up to the way he's handled himself in every other market with every other
Yeah.
team he's played for. He'd be just fine there. But would have been kind of neat to see him in the blue and white.
Epitome of class. In the chat, somebody asked about how you felt seeing Pontus Holmberg pick up an assist last night. That was pretty. He looked like Michael Nylander passing to Willie Nylander on that play.
Yeah, it's nice vision, man. It's sometimes you got to get the puck deep and go and get it and make a play. And Willie's going to the net, and you make things happen. Unfortunately, it seems like they get 4 chances in a game and they convert on one of them, and that's just the story lately. It's not good enough. I don't like when you look at Willie being Willie and playing with Holmberg and playing with Domi, like it's just not good enough. And every time there's an opening up with the big boys, Bobby McMahon, everyone else gets to take it. And you're looking at Willie like, man, he's getting the scraps, but he is like the most dynamic player on the ice still, constantly creating and getting that goal and getting, finding offense on the breakaways without cheating. You wonder if he's starting to get annoyed, to be honest with you.
What's Holmberg's first name?
Pontus. Hello,
Thank you.
Pontus. Good to see you.
Thank you. We can move on. Okay, I wanted to get to an intriguing conversation. We all know the Maple Leafs are in search of depth scoring in the bottom 6. Heck, they can even probably use a guy in the top 6. Can I interest you in Brandon Saad, who is just about to become a free agent, agreed to a contract termination with the St. Louis Blues? Did you see he threw away almost $6 million to be a free agent? Like that. Think about that.
Yeah, for anyone that is always annoyed with players and being greedy and wanting more and it being all about the money, look no further than this guy. I mean, yeah, he's made a lot of money and he's won his cups and he's done everything. But I'm sorry, I don't care who you are or what you have in the bank. There's $6 million in front of you, and you're like, nah, I'd rather roll the dice on seeing if I can hook up with a different company to work for. Not many people do that. I don't care what industry you're talking about it. So hats off for him. That shows passion for the game and wanting to end his career on the right note and finding a good fit. And how many owners commit to a guy like that's waiver worthy, and they still got to pay him $6+ million, and the guy's like, you keep it. I'm going to go. I think the best chance for me to have some success is elsewhere. Just keep what you owe me. It never happens. It's very impressive, and it just shows that this guy wants to find the right spot. And now everyone, is intrigued on. So this guy's probably going to be league min, I would think, unless a couple teams really want him. It's intriguing. What do you think about his potential fit and as a bottom six guy on the Leafs?
Yeah, people are already starting to connect the dots. One of them to Edmonton because of Stan Bowman. He wins 2 cups with Chicago in 13 and 15. The other, I probably did it, but to Toronto, played for Craig Berube. I actually don't mind it. I understand this team's been banged up with injuries, but they're lacking something in that bottom six. Like when the bottom six goes out, they're not scoring. Like it just doesn't have that feel where they can get a loose puck and bang the puck in. And I know a guy like Saad hasn't been good, but the one thing I will say, he's still really fast, right? And when you have speed, you can get into a position to score. I mean, who knows what could happen if you put him with like a Matthews or you put him with like a Nylander or put him with somebody. I mean, the guy's got the pedigree. I think it's a low risk, high reward type play. I wouldn't incentivize him in a contract. And, along those lines, if he's no good, you just put him on waivers, send him to the American Hockey League. Like, I don't see the risk at all in at least talking to him. I know the retort would be there's so many bodies there in the bottom six, but dude, I can tell you right now, there's a combination of different guys who the Leafs can put on waivers today and nobody would claim them. I'm sorry. I know people feel otherwise, but it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I agree, especially at this time of year when people are trying to, they got their own problems and they're probably not going to add more by claiming a pretty average player in the bottom six off of waivers. And some people might say that's what Brandon Saad is right now. But like you say, there's still speed there for a guy and his experience level and not just leadership, but it ends up being leadership. Like he doesn't have to wear a number or be the voice in the room necessarily, but knowing what it feels like and what it looks like, maybe he could, inject something into this group that, let's be honest, doesn't know how to win. They don't. Nobody on this roster knows how to win. And their leadership has not won. And all they have is chalked up losses and defeats and thrown away seasons behind them. To get a guy in there that knows what it looks like and knows what it feels like, I don't think would hurt, especially when, it doesn't cost you anything. It's low risk. And like you say, you can get out of it. You're not going to handcuff yourself and regret it. And I'm sorry, but you go through Twitter and everyone's talking about, oh, well, they need to go get this D-man at the trade deadline and then get this power forward center and we need to do this. So they're like, okay, everyone just wants to snap their fingers and have all these. For who? Like, you need to add, but you can't just add without giving. I don't think anyone's real interested in giving up a bunch of first round picks. I don't think anyone's interested in, giving up the Easton Cowans and the Mintons and the Danforths and whether that's even going to sweeten a deal or not. Like, it's just, my point is it's hard to make a deal at the trade deadline and there's no guarantees that you're going to really shake things up and fix the deficiencies on this roster without giving up some major bounty for it. And maybe this guy can be a little piece in the bottom six that can inject some positivity, because right now they look depleted.
Oh, they look so finished, and I get not having Nyes and Tavares on Wednesday night, but again, low risk, high reward. And if there's somebody who can figure him out, it's probably Craig Berube. I mean, there's they know each other, right, from their time in St. Louis. So we'll look on that front. I know somebody brought up the name Jonathan Taves. It was announced the other day, as we talked about on the podcast the last month or so. He's not really looking at a return this year. It's next season. So maybe in the summer they revisit that. We'll see how the Maple Leafs do when it comes to the center ice position. But be sure to join us in Nashville Thursday, March 20th to Sunday, March 23rd for the first ever TLN Nation vacation. We're offering up 2 different packages, one with flights, $24.50 plus tax, one without, $12.99 plus tax. Hotel rooms are double occupancy. For more information on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca. That's nationgear.ca, or check out the link in our show bio. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. We're about 15 minutes away from Jason Demers of the NHL Network for dropping by the podcast. He's good buddies with Joe Thornton out in San Jose. But I worked with JD at the Cup final in June. He's an absolute beauty, and he's got some hot takes, man. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, that's good. It's refreshing. He kind of, called out the Toronto crowd there in the Scotiabank Arena, rightfully so. And I don't know if the players kind of piggybacked on that too after the fact, but they haven't exactly produced a product that's conducive to getting the crowd rowdy lately. So bad timing for that. But yeah, it's looking forward to talking to him about what he sees in Leafs Nation.
Yeah, I remember when I asked yesterday, do you think there's going to be a response from the crowd? There was not, but I actually give them credit. There was no reason to cheer in this game against Minnesota. Low event hockey, once again. The Leafs have dropped 3 in a row. They've scored 3 goals in 3 games. If you think back to last year, it is night and day. Having said that, I want to see out the process, Rosie. All I could think about watching, social media burn to a crisp after the game is like these same people wanted Sheldon Keefe's head last year and said they can't play this style and expect to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the same folk who were saying that are being like, oh, they can't score. It's unbelievable. What are they doing? They got 5 goals in their last 5 games. So, which side is it, is my question.
Well, you got to have layers. You got to be well-rounded. I mean, you can't cheat and try to win 6-5, but you can't sit there and stay on the perimeter and try to win 1-0. It has to have a different variation of strengths, and you have to spread it out. And when you crunch the numbers and look at what's going on, the big boys are doing their job and they're putting up the numbers and they're winning games for you, but you can't expect them all to go 2-1 every single night. I mean, even if you're assembling a junior A team, everyone knows you can't just build it around 3 or 4 talented players. It doesn't work like that. Hockey doesn't work like that. It's not tennis where you can just take one thing and there you go. There's all the other pieces that contribute, and that's why it makes it difficult. And especially in a cap world, I think GMs have as tough a job as they've ever had in this game in trying to build that team that is well-rounded. And when you have deficiencies there, they come to the surface eventually. And I don't know, we're not scoring right now, and people are talking about, oh well, the false hopes that people had for this team earlier in the season were all just goaltending masked a lot of problems. But if you go through the Octobers and Novembers and Decembers, they scored 4 goals, 5 goals, 4 goals, 6 goals, 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals. They're rattling them off. And now it's dried up. And, one of the big boys will get that 1 goal, but that's kind of it. And you need a philosophy that penetrates the middle. They're playing this low event. It's boring. I'm not used to the Leafs playing boring hockey. Oftentimes, if it's not going well, you're yelling at the TV and it's this high event stuff where they're coughing up leads or, breakaway city, but then they'll score ones like, oh my goodness, but at least it's exciting. And this is just this grindy perimeter hockey where they're not penetrating anything, and they got to get to a philosophy that allows, those pucks to get to those scoring chances more often. And it has not been there lately. And I really think this is the first time where I've been like, okay, I'm questioning the makeup of this team at this point in time.
Skins 0769. That same folk is also you, Nick. I disagree. I've been steadfast in saying, and Rosie disagrees. Let me see it in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I can't make a determination. I know you hate that, but I believe in the process. As mentioned, it didn't work with Sheldon Keefe. It didn't win. It didn't work, scoring 7 goals a game. So who am I to make a determination on January 30th if it's actually going to work with Craig Berube? I think we're going to find out. The proof will be in the pudding, the style, the brand. I know a lot of people in the chat talking about 82 preseason games. Game 83 is the important one. I get that, but there's just been a couple duds lately that brings some PTSD to Leafs Nation. I think it's fair in saying that. And I will add that this team just looks tired. They look depleted. I'm not one for excuses because, as mentioned, Kirill Kaprizov didn't play last night, and that team is banged up, and they're not making excuses. But you can, when you don't have JT, when you don't have Nyes, those are 2 marquee pieces in your top 6. You look like a different team, and that's why we're talking so much about Pontus Holmberg, with due respect, of course. So I think you put that all together, you get an effort like that against Minnesota. It wasn't good enough. I mean, I didn't want to come on here and rip them today. I get it. It's the dog days. That's just not good enough. You have to find a way to muster up a victory in that game. The first 2 periods, the first period was it was like a bore, and I get it. The crowd behind them, not really. The third, they got playing. And that's the perplexing part for me, honestly, Rosie, is they always seem to like try to turn it on, and sometimes it works, like that Montreal game where, and it just shows you how good they are that they can do that.
Yeah, and to go to the beginning of your point, I can't stand it when it's like a divided fan base. Like,
Yeah.
see, I told you so, and no, this is gonna like. You don't have to be like a Keefe fan or and then hate on Berube or vice versa. Like, why do you got to do that? They had Keefe, they had some success, but it wasn't good enough, and it was time to move on. They go to a different coach who you think their philosophy will. What are you trying to do when you fire a coach? You're trying to keep some of the positives that were acquired and learned, and then you're trying to fill in some of the deficiencies and cover your bases. And if you're too offensively minded, you try to get some defense. If you're too soft, you try to get some grit. It's just common sense. It doesn't have to be one side against the other. Dubas against Tree Living. Like, stop. Every person that's been in the organization is trying to make it as good as possible. And when the dust settles, the next guy can see where he thinks he can plug some holes, and he's going to go about his business doing that. Like, it's not one mentality against the other. It always annoys me when they're split and say, ha ha, told you so. It drives me nuts. This organization is trying to go in a certain direction. Either you're a fan of it or you're not, and you can see what they're trying to do or you can't. It's not this personal, my opinion over yours. It's like politics, man. It drives me nuts. Like, you don't have to be on polar sides of the aisle. Stop with that shit. You can see what direction they're trying to go in. And yes, I think I don't know, man. It's just, even during O Canada, they're standing, like, even Austin, I just want to fucking give him a smack, say, let's go, big boy. Like, do you know who you are? Do you know what you're capable? Let's go. But he just kind of has that duh, and they're all.
Were you pep talk guy on the bench? You're like, let's a fucking goal, boy. I love when they show like they show like the bench sometimes, and you can see a guy like he's telling the bench, let's do this, guy, stick with it. Were you a vocal guy on the bench, or?
Not every day. I couldn't stand where the same guys say the same stuff, and it's like, dude, it's just noise in the background. But I would try to pick my spots, and when it was necessary, when
Yeah.
you could feel that energy wasn't there, and you're looking around, you're going, holy shit, everyone is sleeping, dude. Then you just boom, you wake up, say something, everyone's like, oh fuck, what is Rosie saying? Oh yeah, shit. I was kind of try to inject something in when it's necessary, but I tried to pick my spots. I wasn't a super rah guy, and it depended on what my role was in the locker room too. If you're a bubble guy trying to stay in the lineup and not get sent down and stuff, you're not rah-rahing it to all the guys every single day. But my role changed throughout time. But sometimes I just think they need a little bit of that. They need someone, like you mentioned, the bottom six guys. Like, to me, if you played a game in the NHL that was kind of average and you're like, I didn't really accomplish a whole lot, and you look back and you look at your shifts and you're like, I didn't do whole lot, in order to justify your ice time and being in the lineup the next day, if you're a bottom six guy, don't you go out there and try to do something like honestly, Nick Robertson is out there and he is working his bloody bag off. Like, look at the way he's working, and he's trying to penetrate. And yes, he comes up short every time, and he pulls off these kind of like, whoa, do you see that move?
Yeah.
That doesn't really amount to anything all the time. And maybe he doesn't quite have the finish or the pedigree to be a guy that is that dynamic to play that style of hockey in this league. But you can tell he is the one guy who is just like, let me out there. And I respect that. But I'm sorry, if he's the number one guy standing out on this roster, there's a friggin' problem. Not enough guys have that mentality where I am just going to work my nuts off like a dog in order to get something happening this shift, this period, this game. It's like you roll over 6 games and you look at a guy and you go, what the hell have you done in 6 games? Nothing. What have you tried to do? You haven't even like addressed it. You haven't like all right, enough's enough. I'm going to go through a wall here for this team. I'm going to set the tone. I'm going to rock some guy and dig this fucking thing out and just mash it on the pads and just muck and grind and create that huge scrum and try to bang in this greasy one just through pure will. Nobody even attempts it. That's what drives me bloody nuts.
I tweeted it out. It was like a walk in the park. I get it. Again, it's late
Sunday drive.
January. Pardon me. Yeah. It just like there's no desperation, no intensity. Like I love the remark you made on Matthews. Like sometimes you look at some of these guys and they're just like so spaced out. Like I get it. You are so damn good. But I would just say, like, I think you made such a great point on Nick Robertson. He comes up short, but the effort. And I'm not questioning the effort, by the way. But
No.
imagine you had that engine of like a Nick Robertson in an Austin Matthews or
Imagine.
in somebody else, how damn good that player would be.
And I'm not like trying to create a narrative where we're starting to pile on Austin Matthews. We know who he is, but when you look at Nathan McKinnon and his just that engine that won't
Yeah.
you can see his will and his desire, and Matthews is kind of out there more, let me pick my spots here. And if those spots don't come to fruition, it's kind of like, can you
Okay.
do more for this team? And maybe that's not fair to say, but I think it is, because I'm saying it. I want to see him be a dog once in a while, like McKinnon. He could easily say, I'm so friggin' skilled. I could pick my spots and still be top 5 in the league. But no, he has that extra. And when you look at Nick Robertson's effort level, I'm sorry, but you're in a spot to try to win a Stanley Cup. Why isn't everyone's effort level there? Especially in the bottom 6. Willie can get away with it. Mitch can get away with it. Austin can get away with it. I wish they would have more of that. Like, I wish sometimes Mitch would just be a Nick Robertson style of play and just be a bulldog on digging those pucks out, spin off guys, and just be relentless. Sometimes he's kind of like reaching for it and just, all right, let me cook when I get the puck. And you could, whatever. I'm not piling on. It's not the big boys' problem. They're putting up the points. You can say what you want, but if you're a bottom 6 guy, how are you not playing like Nick Robertson, at least in an effort sense of things? You don't think that's going to break things free? They don't seem to change anything after 6 games of garbage. You'd think they would throw something else out there, like their effort level, their compete level, their dog, and their heart would show through. No, just let's go do the same shit. Let's go keep one shift after another. I would find it hard to justify my place in the lineup after enough reps of that kind of garbage. I want to see something different to break something loose when the team's playing like this, but no one seems to step up to the plate.
You know what I thought was interesting? So this team has scored 3 goals in the last 3 games, and the narrative for some reason after that game against Minnesota was Morgan Riley. Can you explain that to me? I understand he's had a tough year, and again, I'm like the biggest Morgan Riley backer, and he's got to be better. And Craig Berube was asked about it after the game. But we're burying the lead. They can't score goals, and yet we're blaming what should be the number 1 defenseman on the team. Make sense of that, please.
The timing of it is weird. There's been other times, honestly, I've kind of kept my mouth shut. We're piling on XYZ, but he's kind of, in many people's minds, he's the golden boy in Toronto. He's been there for the longest amount of time, longest serving tenure on the organization. Everyone seems to like him by all accounts. He is a great teammate from everyone I've talked to. So he kind of gets a pass, right? And I've kind of been like, has anyone noticed Morgan Riley? Like, I keep mentioning the poster on my kid's wall. It's got like Makar and all these Fox and these guys, and then he's on the. I'm like, why the hell is he on the poster? Like, and then it's just caught up to him. And I think when people don't really have anything to point at on why they haven't scored goals, it's like now that story has risen to the top. Odd timing of it, I totally understand, but he is not doing a lot to help this team as a $7.5 million D-man. There's no doubt about it. But after a game like that, I certainly don't think it's the lead. I agree.
Yeah, it was just bizarre watching the post-game remarks, and every question was about Morgan Riley. It's like you got no other questions to fire to the table. It's about Morgan. I get it, though. Like it's been a massive struggle, and I think he would be so happy that the month of January has been completed, because they got to get Riley back to a level where he's even a top 4 guy. He has just lost all confidence right now. Reminds me of like Darnell Nurse, I think, last year for Edmonton, where he was zapped. And now I saw a legit thing on Oilers Nation. Darnell Nurse should get a call for the 4 Nations Canadian team, and I laughed. But it just shows you his level of play has improved, so it's doable here with Morgan Riley.
I know there's, and you're breaking guys up. Like you put McCabe with him to try and help out.
Yeah.
Now McCabe's a consummate -2, and
yeah,
him and Tanev were cooking so well. But I understand you're trying to get Morgan Riley going, so you're trying to help him out. But I mean, on both sides of the rink, Morgan is struggling, and he'll go in for this one. Like, I always tip my cap to defensemen in the NHL. It is such a difficult position. I played it professionally for 2 years, switched to forward, and I know how difficult it is. Like, you think you're in the right place, and one little hop of the puck and bang, bang, it's in the back of your net. And you're like, good Lord, man, it's very difficult. And he seems like he's on the raw side of those plays more often than not. He's in position. He's got the body position and a guy, and all of a sudden one little squeaker, he doesn't get it through his feet and it's in the back of the net. That happens like twice a game to the guy, but he's not doing a lot to help himself on the offensive side, struggling in the D zone. And like you said, when you lose your confidence back there, you question every decision and you don't do anything with confidence. It's a very difficult thing. And I hope he can pull himself out, because this team is is certainly needing him. You've got this player who's not only doing what a $7.5 million player is supposed to do to your organization, he's like a detriment to the organization right now. Like every game, he's hurting you, and he's that one. Oh God, and he's not doing anything offensively. It's a tough look for him, and I hope he crawls out of it because they need him.
Call me crazy. I think he could benefit from a night off. I don't know if you want to call it a healthy scratch. And I think Zach Phillips made a great point. You know about cracking the whip and Craig Berube? We thought he's going to come in and crack the whip. Has he really? Has he really cracked the whip? I don't know. It's a question.
And I don't think Riley's the kind of guy who's going to wake up and play better by getting in his face and sending
But
him a
sometimes
message.
just to see like that one game off, just to sit in the press box and just, take your thoughts in and then just come back the next game. I don't know.
I know, but in Toronto, that's just going to be a media firestorm. Every question in the world is just going to pile on him more. And I have a feeling there's something going on behind the scenes with Morgan Riley. Something's going on. I don't want to speculate, but it just seems like he's not himself. And I don't know if it's personal stuff or what, but he just doesn't seem to have it. And I think that piling more of that not pressure, but just spotlight on him for his bad play by scratching him. I don't know if that's the answer. I honestly don't know what the answer is to get him through it, but I just don't think Craig Berube piling on him and calling him out and scratching him, and his remarks were, hey, Morgan knows he's got to be better. We all know he's got to be better. We all know he can be better. He's got to play through this. And I don't know if going the other route with it is going to be the answer to get the most out of the guy.
This interview is brought to you by our friends over at Greta Bar. Whether it's before, during, or after the game, it's the place to be on King Street West. Awesome street food and wicked arcade games. 590 King Street West. Greta Bar. Let the games begin. Let's bring in now a former NHLer, an Olympian with the NHL Network, among other sites, doing some great work as well with the San Jose Sharks. It is Jason Demers, a former NHL defenseman. JD, what's happening, bud?
What is up, guys? Good to be on here. And Jay Rosehill, I see you. Yeah,
What's
it was
going
my
on?
first year in the AHL. You were part of probably the scariest team I ever played against in Norfolk. When I went in there with Worcester, and I'll never forget getting my ass kicked by Steve Downey. So,
Oh, there are some mutants on that team, hey?
you guys, it was the scariest goddamn team ever. And like, you guys were actually good too, because you still played hockey. It wasn't like you guys didn't, but if there's any, it was crazy. It was like 3 lines. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah,
Big
what's
fan of
up,
you
man?
guys, and it's good to see you. I love what you guys are doing here. So good to be here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man. What's you made some noise there calling out the Leafs Nation fan base there. What were you surprised by the kickback in that?
It was a lot more positive than it was
Yeah.
negative. I could tell you that much. Like, I got maybe 2 negative comments, and it's still going. Like, I wake up in the morning and there's tons of messages every day, and it's mainly positive. So I must have hit something on the head. And it's not, listen, I'm not the first person to say this. I was just more echoing statements, and I think I said the quiet part out loud of what Austin was alluding to, and something that's kind of been, I don't want to say growing, but it has, with just and this may be more of an economic thing than anything. And I don't want to get too political, but it's corporate, and it is what it is. And it's tough because you expect to like get some juice from your building, and this team has been good. They haven't, like I said, I prefaced it by saying, okay, they haven't performed in the playoffs, and everybody right now is like, well, let's just get to the playoffs. This team will make the playoffs, but it's like, can they get over the hump? And maybe that's why they're just not excited for the regular season as much as other teams are. But I've been in some buildings with good teams, bad teams, and when the fans are rocking, it's a different scene. So I just think, bring some of the rabid fans from up top, put a student section in at the rink in Toronto, and let's see how it goes, because you look at, what was their next game they went on the road, was it in Buffalo, and those rabid Toronto fans that travel, it was
Ottawa.
louder than
Yeah.
than the rink in Toronto. So I'm just like, you want, fans are what make the world go around in terms of sports, and they're the ones that are putting their hard-earned money, and if they want to act anyway, and be quiet, sure, it's great. But, I think if you're going to go to a sports arena and you're going to, especially going corporate tickets, and maybe you're in a suit or whatnot, or you don't want to scream, but like, why go to a sporting event if you can't get excited? So
You're right, and you're not far removed from being in the National League, and I'm sure you got buddies. Like, do guys talk about this type of stuff? Like, whether it's in Toronto, do guys even care about the crowd noise?
Guys in Toronto will be, I don't want to say any guys in Toronto sit and blow any of their spots up, but guys, I get a lot of texts from people and even guys at the network and guys that played that were like, that rink stinks. There's like, in terms of like, there's no juice from the lower bowl. Like it will get loud, but it gets loud for the wrong reasons. And it's at weird times. And, Jay, you played too. And it's like, you could just pull so much from a crowd and sometimes you get a little bit demoralized because it just feels negative. It just feels like there's a negative connotation attached to that when it's that quiet. And guys in the league notice it. And if you're, I played in Arizona where we didn't have many fans. And when teams come in, it benefits the road team because it turns into almost like a glorified shinny hockey practice where that there'll never be a moment where, Toronto's skating downhill at you. And then I also played in like the Shark Tank where guys would say, and it was known around the league, like just get through the first 5-10 minutes and we might have a chance to win, but we're probably going to be down 3-0. So it's like, those are the kind of things that a building can provide for a team. And I just think it's lacking in Toronto.
And we were talking about, the look on Austin Matthews' face kind of during the anthem. It's just kind of like dull, no energy. And like the team kind of looks like that sometimes. Their body language and their facial expression is just like, shit, are you ready to play a game in the National League right now? And you could say chicken or the egg, what comes first? Oh, you got to provide good content for them to get fired up. Oh, well, you got to get fired up to have them, play with passion. But like you said, when you're in your own barn and the place is rocking and you're swinging your leg over for your next shift and that place is fucking buzzing where the coach has got to yell to tell who's up at the gate, and you're like, you start to get those goosebumps and you're ready to fucking go. And it's palpable. Like it literally helps. And people don't think it does, but like you wonder why this team sometimes doesn't play with a lot of energy. Like there's nothing to build off of. And it shouldn't be the case with the biggest hockey club in the biggest market with the most passionate fans. How it's just such a Leafy thing again. How does this team have a quiet, shitty, no energetic, no atmosphere barn to play in? It's crazy.
And I preface all this by saying, like, and I know a lot of Leafs fans watch this, don't take for granted the teams you have. They might not have won a cup, but don't take for granted the good teams you've had because it turns quickly. And when it does, you think that you have it bad where you guys aren't making it out of the first round. Like I was on a Sharks team. We didn't win. We had a lot of cup runs. The fans were insane all the time. And I just went back I tell people all the time, I went back to the Joe Thornton jersey retirement. We had our alumni game and we all went on the ice and like the TXU arena they did in the AHL rink. And that was like louder than at the rink in Toronto. And it literally, we were skating around and I had this kind of weird moment where I was like, that whole dumb cliche of you don't know you're in the good times until you're out of it. And it's like, and you wish you knew that you were there in the moment. It's like, don't take these good teams for granted. And conversely, when you have a good fan base, don't take the fan base for granted because it can switch in a minute. And then you're in like Chicago territory or San Jose territory right now where, you're struggling to win 20 games in a season and the fan base will leave quick because, it's just the way it is. And you really think that it's quiet. So, a lot of fans that come back and say, well, why don't they win? And I'm like, they're putting up very competitive seasons year in and year out. And yes, they haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs, but it's tough to win the Stanley Cup. It is a hard goddamn thing to do. And the teams that do it and figure it out, it's a special thing. And Toronto just hasn't got there yet, but you don't want to alienate these guys enough where it stops becoming a destination for guys to come to and sign in. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, we're last in the league. This sucks. And it's like, well, yeah, you had some good ass teams for a long, long time and don't take those for granted.
Hey man, I lived through the Jay Rosehill era, so I know exactly what you're saying. And also, the crowd does get cooking in the playoffs. I go to playoff games, and it's generally pretty loud. So it really is weird how it's night and day. But curious to get your thoughts. Aside from we totally agree with you on the crowd. Like it's just an absolute joke at this point in time. We don't even bring it up anymore. but this team in general, like, do you think they have the right mix to maybe do something substantial this spring?
I've been firm all season. Like this is them and Winnipeg Jets. It's like wake me up in April because I don't really care what they do. I don't care about the ups and downs this season. But the things that are happening now are a little bit concerning. I know they've had some injury trouble. Obviously losing Stolars, but Wolves came in and played really good, solid hockey. And I think that, the Tavares injury, they were okay for a little bit, but he provides a good depth piece. And then Matthew Nyes. I think Matthew Nyes is showing that he has a much bigger role than people thought on this team and is quiet. It was like quietly an underdog on this team in terms of like what he provides, the spark offensively, in terms of his physicality, getting on the forecheck. And those two pieces are huge. So, if I'm Toronto, I'm assessing what I have, and this might be beneficial for a playoff run because what I'm looking at is I'm like, what's going to happen in April? Do you have the team that if you have some injuries can hang on in a playoff? Because J2, to get through a long playoff run, you need guys coming up, you need depth pieces. And right now they've lost two key pieces and they've struggled. They can't score. And it's not like these were two highly, highly dynamic offensive guys, but it's guys that open up space for Nylander, for Amats, for Marnes, and now that's not there. So you're kind of seeing like, okay, we need to have these guys back, number one, but we need to make sure that our depth is on point come playoff time because if anybody gets hurt, it's going to be it's probably the strongest Eastern, conference year, I think, in terms of teams that are capable of winning the cup than it's been in past years that I've seen. So they're going to have to get through some very, very good hockey teams and that play a tough brand of hockey. So it's a little concerning to me seeing this but also, I would take this if I'm the brain trust there. I'm like, okay, this is what we need. We know now that like these are the pieces that we need to get over the hump, and it's not going to cut it if we don't have it. We might need to add some depth, like a Brandon Saad, somebody veteran like, and keep adding those pieces so that if we do lose some guys, we have some people that can come up because that's the biggest issue for me with Toronto is like when those top guys stop scoring, what do you got?
She dries up in a hurry. I don't know if you were in the waiting room when we were talking about Morgan Riley, but his struggles are now starting to come to the surface with the latest buzz around the media. As a defenseman in that league, what are you seeing lately from Morgan Riley?
Yeah, it hasn't. I'm a Morgan Riley fan too, and one of those guys that I like the way he plays, but it's just been tough, honestly. And I don't know if no one's really worked with him too as a partner. They need to find somebody for him. I think what it's shown is they do need another top four defenseman. I think there's a lot of teams in the league, but I think this is a big need for this team. And I don't know where you get it right now. Maybe Erasmus Ristolainen if you can make it work. But I don't know if the money works, but you need somebody that's going to help defensively Morgan Riley because that's been the biggest struggle. Like he'll move the puck up and stuff and he'll get some scoring chances and he'll be able to create offense, but defensively it's just not been good. And not that he was ever a huge stalwart defensively, but it's been more apparent this year than in past years. I was listening to you guys before and I agree with you. I don't know if something's going on. And again, I wouldn't speculate and try to, but yeah, it's just he needs help defensively. It's just nothing's working. He doesn't have the right partner. I don't know if Jake McCabe is the guy to go with him playing on his right side. I'd much rather Jay in that 5-6 role and playing physical and kind of being a good complement to a young guy that they might have to come up like a Myers or a Timmins when he's back. But
Like every
yeah,
time we're talking about Morgan Riley, it's always like they haven't found the right guy to play with them and they need someone.
Yeah.
Isn't he supposed to be the stud?
100%.
Isn't he supposed to make his partner better? Like this is getting embarrassing. Like you're supposed to be the stud. And now everyone's clamoring to figure out who you can play. You're supposed to be the guy that makes anyone else with you better. And it's the complete opposite.
And I agree with that. And I think them bringing in some better defensemen this year has highlighted that fact, like Ekman Larson and Tanev. And now you're seeing that, like, he never really, I don't know if he ever really was a line driver, maybe for early on, but he was never really a line driver. And I think that's where you come into a little bit of an issue. And because when it's bad and I think they were able to. You see it when they're not scoring. Like that's where it's like prevalent. Like when they're scoring and he's creating, it's there. But when they're not scoring, you're like, oh shit, like like this is an issue. And again, we're not saying he's not an NHL defenseman. It's not an indictment on his game or anything like that. It's just where it's at. I just if I'm Toronto, like I just said before, like the season is just evaluating to this point of what we need and what we need to do to retool, not in retool in the sense of like who do we got to bring in and who do we got to move. And I mean, they're kind of due for a big move anyway. And this could be somebody that they're looking to move who might need a change of scenery as well, because, even last year he struggled before up until that cross check, it really was. And then that cross check kind of galvanized the group and really everybody started playing. So I don't know if you can ask him to have another moment like that and go just haul off on somebody. So I just think it's sometimes the fit just stops fitting, and it's just you kind of come to an end. I had that on teams that I played where you're so good for so long and then just something stops working. And also you look at, I don't know if Craig Berube and him, that style matches, because, Craig Berube is more of a coach to coach a Ekman Larson or a Chris Tanev or a Jake McCabe. I don't know if really Morgan Riley suits with him and it's a good match. So that's where it's like, that's where I'm at with him. I think, and it's a tough one because I feel like if you move him, he's going to go flourish somewhere, which, because he is a good player, I just think they're at that weird impasse. And I hear it when I was listening to you talk, Jay. It's like everybody's kind of like, he's not playing good enough, but shit, if we trade him, but it's like, do we trade him? And it's like, they're at that weird moment where it's like, what do they, it's really, I don't know if there's a right answer, and it's going to be, they're going to just have to close their eyes and make a decision, because again, if you stick with him, bring somebody alongside him, it doesn't work, they get another exit. Well, now you just wasted another year. Or do you make that kind of move that looks crazy at the time, but gets you over the hump?
Unfortunately, he dictates everything with the no movement
Yeah,
clause,
of
and
course.
that contract's so untradeable too. Like he just gets so
Mm.
much term and so much money left on it. Do you think he could benefit from like a health bomb? I brought that up earlier on, and I do think guys more times than not respond accordingly after being a healthy scratch.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's tough because of how long he's played. I think it depends on his character and can he handle that. And that's a conversation you have to have between him and Berube. And if Berube sits him down and is like, hey, you have not played good enough. Here's why I think you need a rest and a mental reset and then come back because we need you for the playoffs, and maybe frame it that way. I think that's a possibility. And again, you've seen the struggles of not only this team recently, but him specifically. And not to say he's a scapegoat, but he hasn't played good enough. He has not been up to snuff. And his plus minus, even though I'm not a huge proponent on it, is horrendous compared to the other defensemen. So it's tough to kind of protect him. And I think you kind of don't want to stoke the fire in the media and wake them up and have them kind of start asking questions of Morgan Riley. But you're at an impasse right now. You're at this weird point where something's got to give, and there has to be a decision one way or another, whether you come out and say he's our guy or you come out and say he's scratched.
Do you think Tree Living is going to make a splash at the trade deadline? Do you think they have enough bullets in the chamber to move things around? Or do you think that's kind of a pipe dream that fans just want to snap their fingers and get X, Y, and Z come March 7th?
You're gonna have to get creative. Obviously, you look at what Edmonton's doing with the Klingberg deal. That won't hurt them because it's halfway through the season. You look at Brandon Saad, that could be a possibility. But it more becomes, and I haven't looked at their cap, but I'm assuming it's more of a dollar in, dollar out situation, or they got to get really creative with LTIR. But going to like the no move clause, I know you mentioned that with Morgan Riley and Jay, this too. It's like I had a modified no move, and I always tell people if they want to get rid of you, they will find a way for you to waive your no move, and they'll make it uncomfortable, and there'll be a conversation where you'll be, you know what, okay, screw it, like let's get out of here. So, I think it's going to be interesting. I think when everybody's healthy and playing their best, they have a team that is good, especially at the goaltending. If Stolarz comes back and he's he's what he was before the injury, and you got Wool, you got two, and then Morgan Riley. There's a lot of ifs though on this team. So is Tree Living going to be antsy and make a move now? I'm just not a fan of deals at the deadline because I think it's not enough time. March 9th or whatever the day is, it's not enough time to build chemistry. If you're going to make a splash, you have to do it now, like Carolina did, because Carolina can still make a move again and another big splash come the deadline if it doesn't work. Same thing with Colorado. I just think the next month or so is the time. And then after that, once you get into March, it has to be little kind of puzzle piece fits or somebody like Assad that's coming in for very cheap. That's going to be a depth piece. But this yeah, it's one of those. I wasn't worried about Toronto like 3 weeks ago. I was like, this is great. Like this is ho hum. And then now you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, oh no. And I feel like Leafs fans too. We're like, we lost. We're playing our best. And then you had one injury, two injuries, three. And then you're like, now we're not playing good. Now our top D men are supposed struggling. And it's like, oh crap. Now we got to do something. So we'll see if cooler heads prevail. I would probably hold pat to see how injured and how quickly those guys can come back before the Four Nations. But yeah, waiting till March for me, I just don't love it. It doesn't sit with me. I'd be remiss if I said like, yeah, wait, make a big splash. I'm like, if you have something in the chamber, I would pull the trigger now versus March.
Yeah, and the worst part about this, they look tired, but all their marquee players pretty much are going to play in the Four Nations in a couple weeks' time. So a couple guys are going to be off to Mexico. These guys are off to Montreal and Boston. We'll see what happens. JD, excellent stuff today. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, dude.
Anytime. That is Jason Demers, former NHL defenseman. Catch him on the NHL Network. But yeah, I mentioned I'm a collab in that video, and there's still commentary from a lot of people. And I think it's interesting that somebody in the States points it out. I know he's Canadian, but he obviously works in the States now. But just the crowd noise. But that game specifically against the Wild, I get it. Like there was nothing to cheer for in that game.
Yeah, they've had some of those boring games this season, which I don't know if I expected necessarily. Like I thought there'd be a lot more bump and grind and forecheck and crash and bang and and then maybe there wouldn't be as many, wild ups and downs throughout the game and it would be a little bit more consistent and linear, but it's just kind of almost quite a few snoozers where I'm like, gee, there's nothing to tweet about. There's nothing to talk about. I'm just sitting here waiting. And it's like, 12 minutes into the second period and like nothing really exciting has happened. It's not really, a great sign, but yeah, I like what Jason said. Like, do something now, make a splash now. I don't know what the hell is to wait for. If you have a deal and something's in place and you can pull a trigger and you think it makes you a little bit better, hell, pull the trigger. Yeah, because March 7th, 4 quick weeks pop by and you're like, holy shit, it's the end of the season. Like you're barely figuring out if this works or not. So I absolutely don't mind. Like I would love it if my phone blew up this afternoon and something went down. Nothing would make me happier at this point in time. I think the team could use it.
And as a side note, very seldom do those blockbuster trades end up being, working around the deadline and teams go on to win a Stanley Cup. I think the last time was like Jeff Carter back in the day or like a Marian Gaborik. It's more of those Swiss Army guys. And again, I always bring it up, the Barbashevs, the Lekkonens. I think that's why Trent Frederick's name is going to be really, really intriguing. It's like finding that perfect fit as opposed like even the Leafs. They got Ryan O'Reilly. Remember how jacked we were for that? And yeah, I thought he was awesome in the small little run. If he doesn't hurt his hand, who knows how good he is in the playoffs. But still, all the big goals, his DNA all over those big ones for the Maple Leafs. But it's about finding the right fit. I'm not scorched earth today. I'm not happy about the way this team has been playing the next little while or the last little while. But I'm curious to see how they look. Like they got 4 games left here before the Four Nations, not playing at home until now, February 22nd against Carolina. But they got Edmonton Saturday. They got Calgary Tuesday. They got Seattle on Thursday. Then wrapping with Vancouver, man. So I know there's got to be a bit of soul searching on that flight out west here.
Yeah, you're hoping that it's going to be a good thing to get out of town, pack your bag. Being on the road's different. You're on the jet and you're bullshitting with each other. You're playing some cards. You get off together. Everyone checks into the hotel together. Hey, we're going to go grab a bite at this place. team dinner tonight at XYZ. Everyone's there having a bullshit. Maybe a couple guys sneak out and have some beers and have some laughs. And it just kind of gets you out of your individual comfort zone of this is my routine when we're at home with my wife or my kids and I live on here. You're all in the hotel. Hopefully it can kind of, create something with somebody and just open something up. I know you're kind of grasping at straws here, but getting on the road sometimes can be a breath of fresh air, and hopefully it jogs something loose. They need to stay focused before this Four Nations. They know it's always kind of a coach's thing to say, don't think about 3 days down the road. Think about today. You're going to get your break or you're going to go play in the Four Nations or whatever, but focus on what needs to be done right now. And that part of it, I don't love the idea of thinking about trying to keep them focused right now. You're on a 3-game goddamn slide. You better be nose to the books and figuring out what exactly everyone needs to do with super high preparation and thinking about your place on this team and what you can do to help.
It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. I'm going to play Mikko Rantanen over 1.5. Carolina at home to the Chicago Blackhawks. So that's where I'm going to look. And I don't mind the look. Plus money. Marc-Andre Fleury, his final game in Montreal against the Habs, who are the favorite in that game, the Wild in the back-to-back.
Cool. I just opened my app and I am looking at such things. I'm going to take the Jets in regulation against the Bruins. I think the Jets are so bloody good, man. Their first line is just like, wow. I think they're a very hot team, and I know we'll see what happens in the playoffs with them and whatnot, but they're a hot as hell team, and I think they can take the Bruins in regulation tonight.
All right, Rosie, that's going to do it for this week. Carter Hutton's in tomorrow. So any last words for producer Vic Paladian, who will be getting married on Saturday?
Vic wants to tell me that McAvoy is back tonight. I don't give a shit. They're still going to beat them in, what's it called? Vicky, it's not too late to pull the pin. Just kidding. Kidding, buddy. I know there's a lot of stress and planning that goes into a wedding, and my goodness, but trust me, on the day it goes by so fast and you can't believe it's over. So savor it, buddy. That is my advice. And shoot me a FaceTime if you get the chance.
Yeah, we're going to get pinned at this wedding, so rest assured there will be a FaceTime. And lastly, I wanted to get you on this. Reeves and Nurse, do you expect anything on Saturday in Edmonton?
No, I don't. I don't really. I think just trying to think of how that would go. A forecheck, a shot back, turn around. I just can't imagine they drop the gloves, but man, that'd be amazing if they did. Maybe Reva would have a little chip on his shoulder and he took his comments personally. That would be great if he did kind of go after him with a little bit of extra. You want this noise? We'll see what happens.
It's funny, for all the bitching about Connor Garland in Edmonton, it's been very quiet on the Ryan Reeves, the pitchfork front on Ryan Reeves, hasn't it?
Yeah, it kind of has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
See if he can stoke something.
One guy's a giant, one guy's 5'7", so that's where piling on him in the Vancouver Canucks and Connor Garland, who suddenly are catching fire. That story makes no sense, but Rosie, great job. We'll reconvene on Monday, okay?
Sounds good. Speaking of those guys, though, Quinn Hughes, my God, I didn't realize what kind of a point machine he was. Like, he's head and shoulders above Makar, and he's played less games. I'm like, excuse me? I had to double take that this morning. But people to watch for and people that we need to take care of.
Yeah, very fascinating Hart Trophy race, man. For the first time in a long time, there's a legit defenseman or two involved in that convo. I think Connor Hellebuyck should be the front runner right now. He's been that good, very Carey Price-like from 10 years ago, Jose Theodore and Leon Draisaitl. I mean, there's just so many different guys involved in that conversation. So excellent job at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you once again to Jason Demers of the NHL Network for dropping by. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk on Friday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.